The Acolyte has finished up its first season, 8 episode run, and some tells me it may not be getting a second season, but I could be wrong. I do have some thoughts, so let's get into them. Hello, my name is Diamond, aka Lady Leo. Welcome to my channel if you are a brand new viewer, or welcome back if you are a returning viewer. So now that The Acolyte has finished airing all of its episodes, I've really had a chance to kind of like sit with the series, process it, and really like go over my thoughts with the series. So before I kind of get started with like what I think about the series, I just wanted to very briefly go over like my own history with Star Wars so that you understand kind of like where I'm coming from. I would say that I got more into Star Wars probably the last 5-ish to 10 years. I've sort of been generally familiar with Star Wars pretty much most of my sort of mid-teens to adulthood, but for a long time I'd never actually seen the full original trilogy. I remember when I was a kid, they used to play like A New Hope more than the other two, so I would always catch like parts of A New Hope, but like I never saw it from start to finish. So after a while, I just kind of gave up on trying to watch the series. And it was probably another 4 or 5 years after that where I met someone who was really into Star Wars. I ended up seeing the prequel trilogy before I saw the OG trilogy. And then all that's in between. I watched Clone Wars. Well, I watched parts of Clone Wars, a lot of seasons of Clone Wars. I watched some of Rebels. So I'm sort of generally familiar with Star Wars. I would consider myself a Star Wars fan, not a fanatic, someone who really likes Star Wars, likes different stories being told, likes to see certain characters and all that jazz. So when they announced this series, I was actually really happy because first off, it would take place outside of what I would say is like this very small window of time that we seem to be laser focused in for a lot of the Star Wars stories. And that would be pre-Empire, Empire, and post-Empire. I'm not in any way suggesting that that period is not important or that it doesn't have a lot of stories that it can be told. I'm just saying sometimes I get tired of being in this one span of time. We are talking about a lot of time, but well, I guess not relatively speaking, and like in terms of like how long the Jedi and the Sith and all that has been around. But yeah, considering that this series is set 100 years before the Empire, I really liked that aspect of it. It means we get to focus on characters who have no connection to any of the characters that we know probably. And it takes place in the High Republic era. So I was really happy to get a chance to focus in on that type of story. So let me start off with the positive, the things that I really liked. I really enjoyed the fighting style of the show. I think that sometimes lightsaber battles can get boring. Hopefully the Star Wars fandom doesn't crucify me in the comments. But you know, if you have two characters who are fighting each other, who are using the same exact weapon and similar fighting styles. I know there's different fighting styles with lightsaber. I'm just saying that, like, to me, it can get boring. And I really appreciate this approach in the show where there's a lot more of an emphasis on like hand-to-hand combat, but they do also throw in lightsaber battles too. So I appreciate that. And I think like the way that I process it is in this particular era, which is part of the High Republic era, they are strictly peacekeepers. They haven't seen a war in a long time. So it might make more sense that the Jedi would prioritize sort of like hand-to-hand fighting or defensive styles as opposed to like pulling your lightsaber as like the first option. So that's kind of the way that I think about it is like, oh, okay. So like, you know, hand-to-hand first, and then like as a last resort, you can pull out your lightsaber. So that's how I approach it. But I feel like the fight choreography is really, really good. It's really well structured. And I do like the lightsaber battles that they have in there too. So I thought the fight choreography was really good, really interesting. And I thought all the fight scenes are really, really fun. So I also really like the cast. I think that the cast does a really great job. I don't know if the script is always like rising to meet them, but the cast is really well done. And I really enjoy everybody. There's nobody that I feel like is an outlier in terms of doing bad. I like some of the elements that the show introduces, like the idea of aversions and how the twins were created by manipulating the Force, and the fact that they are one consciousness set into two different bodies. I feel like that's interesting. And there's a lot of elements like that which I find are interesting throughout the show. And I feel like that's kind of where the positive stops for me. So we're going to get into the problems that I had with the show. I feel like the episode structure is working against the show, and just in the sense that, I mean, there's only 8 episodes, and most of them run in the 30 to 40 minute range, which I just think is too short for an 8 episode season. And I feel like all of the episodes could do with like an extra 10 to 15 minutes on top of them. But I also feel like maybe an extra episode or two would really help flesh out some of the conflicts and the sort of mysteries that the show introduces. So overall, I just don't think the episodes are long enough. And I feel like with Disney, it might be interesting for them to try different formats of releasing episodes. You know what I mean? Like, every studio is different. Netflix tends to drop everything all at once, but they have been moving more towards splitting everything into parts, like they did with Bridgerton, and like they did with the third season of The Witcher. I didn't realize that they were going to be splitting the last season of Cobra Kai into 3 parts, but yeah, they're doing that with Cobra Kai. So I sort of like this format, because the problem with binging something all at once is that you binge it and it's done, and that's kind of it. So I do kind of like this format of like maybe releasing half and half, and I feel like that might be something that might have helped this. Obviously, with them not making any changes to like the length of the episodes, it wouldn't have changed the overall story, but it just may have changed how it is, like how you perceive it. That makes sense, or how it eats, if that makes sense, like how it's viewed. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like I feel like it might have changed just like how you digest it, because there's a couple of episodes that I feel like are like part 1s, and then you gotta wait for the part 2, but the episode is so short, you're just like, why can't you just release these 2 together, So I'm not saying that Disney should go like to a drop it all at once kind of thing, but maybe like a part 1 and part 2, and mix that based around like what you're releasing. I think that might have helped with this. But I feel like the thing that I walk away with most from this show is sort of a feeling of being like underwhelmed. And the finale to me was very underwhelming. I don't feel like it answered some of the questions that I was sort of intrigued by. And I get it. I get it that like not everything that you set up within a season is going to be paid off. But I tend to appreciate shows that treat a season like it's the last one, right? Because even though it's Disney and it's Star Wars, you really don't know that you're going to be getting a second season. So if you treat this season like it's the only season you're going to get, you can still put some Easter eggs in there in case you do happen to get a second season. But that way, like, you can resolve some of the things that you set up and the questions that you ask. But I don't come away from the show with any sort of sense of satisfaction or resolution. If anything, I have more questions, and I hate that kind of frustrating feeling of like not feeling like you get your questions answered. And then the finale to me was just, it was very lackluster. I was watching it thinking to myself, okay, I mean, are we done? It doesn't seem like anything of substance is going on in the finale. So what I feel like ends up happening for me, especially with the finale, is that this whole finale and this season, it feels like a part 1. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like this is the introduction of the show, and then like a couple months later, we're waiting to drop a part 2. I don't feel anyway like satiated by the end of the show, and I'm still sort of genuinely confused as to some of the things that are going on. Like, there's so many things that the show sets up that it doesn't really, answer, like the twins. The twins are the most interesting part of the show, and dare I say, a focal point of the show until Chimere comes in, and then, we're all like, oh, he's pretty interesting. But setting up that the twins are one consciousness split into 2 bodies, I found that really intriguing, because in the finale, I was really hoping that Osha would combine with May. They would assimilate into each other since they are one consciousness. I guess my mind was going to this place where, like, okay, Osha's completed her arc. Sorry, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but like, if you haven't seen the show, this might contain spoilers. But yeah, so like, Osha's completed her arc. She's found out that Soul lied and he was the one who killed her mother. She kills Soul. So to me, I'm like, okay, Osha's completed her arc of like understanding her past, and like the need for her to be split into 2 separate bodies is not necessary anymore. So like, I was really hoping her and May would combine, but instead what ends up happening is they don't, and Chimere erases or nullifies most of her memory all the way back until she's 8, and they leave her for the Jedi to find. First off, can the Force do that? Can you manipulate the Force to erase memories? Now, I don't really know if he's erasing her memories so much as it is like suppressing them. He could be just suppressing her memories, but can you erase someone's memories like that? And again, wouldn't it have been easier to just combine with May and become one body? What do you need May as a separate body for? I mean, I don't know if she knows how to do that. I'm just saying she's back on Brendok where the Vergence is. The Force is particularly strong there. She was raised as a witch. I'm just saying it seems like it's possible, but it doesn't happen. She doesn't end up combining with May. So I just don't understand the need of setting up this premise of having 2 separate bodies when they're one person. And there's no real payoff to like knowing that they are two separate bodies with one consciousness because of how they leave both of them at the end, but particularly May. And I was just like, what a weird choice to make, at least to me. Then you have Soul, who I come away a bit confuddled by. I start off the show really liking the character, and then as time goes on, I find myself confused because I don't really understand how we got from like A to B with Soul. So we see when we do the flashback, so let me just kind of explain. There's 2 separate flashbacks to like the events that took place that set Osha and May on their separate paths, which took place 16 years on Brendok. And we see that from Osha's perspective, like maybe episode 2 or 3. It's pretty early into the season. And then towards the end, we see the same events really from the perspective of Soul. And I find myself like watching the episode and trying to understand why Soul has this intense connection to the girls immediately. Like he's incredibly overprotective and he's making split judgments left and right. So much so that I started thinking to myself, is there something in Soul's history that would like denote this type of response? But the Jedi are taken when they are pretty young, usually like, I don't know, somewhere from like 4 to 6. So that they don't have this attachment to their family. And considering that Soul's older, it seems highly unlikely that he would have had something like this happen where he had a family or an attachment to a child. So I don't really understand where this intense overprotection for Osha and May comes from. It comes out of complete left field. He doesn't know them from a hole in the wall. He sees them, assumes that something bad is going on, and then completely overcompensates for it. And I'm just baffled by it because I'm just like, what's happening here? Like, I don't understand why he keeps making these crazy decisions for these 2 girls. Or maybe he had a bad experience with witches. It's never really explained. It's just kind of presented as him being like incredibly overprotective and making a lot of bad choices. And then everybody else, the other Jedis who are on the planet with him, having to back him up. But I don't really understand his choices or his motivations. So in the end, I don't understand why he did any of that. So much so that I find the character like incredibly frustrating, that like when Osha decides to kill him, I don't really feel anything by that point because I'm so like disconnected from being attached to the character that I'm just like, okay, she killed him. Let's get into Chimere, the best part of the show. Sorry, before we get into Chimere, also, May's Kyber crystal changes from blue to red by introducing her blood. Again, I am a Star Wars fan, but I do not know everything. I don't read, any of the novels. I don't watch stuff religiously. So just asking a genuine question. Can you do that? Is that how a lightsaber gets red? I don't know. I guess I always assumed that there was different colored Kyber crystals, or maybe your connection to the Force changes what color they appear as. But I guess I didn't really think that like introducing blood is what changes the Kyber crystal to red. That's a small aside on my part. I'm just genuinely wondering. So getting on to Chimere, who I feel like is the best part of the show. He's the one I'm the most interested in, and it's not just because I love Manny Jacinto, because I did watch The Good Place. But I find him to be the most interesting character, and he's the one you don't really know that much about as his backstory. but you get like little pieces here and there, and you're just like, what's your story? Like when we saw the scar on his back, something told me that he had something to do with Vernestra, because that definitely looked like it was from some kind of a whip. And it's confirmed in the finale when she steps down on the planet and recognizes his presence. So there's something there, and I would be intrigued to understand what it is. Also, he has hands down the best fighting scenes, which is the first fighting scene where we are introduced to him, and then the second one that he has with Soul. Yeah, he's got the best fighting scenes, and he uses a mix of like hand-to-hand comp and lightsabers, and he's just so proficient in the Force that he has such an intensity to him, which I really love. If the show does end up getting a second season, which who am I to say? I don't know if the show will, because there was a lot of review bombing in the beginning, which I don't really agree with, but I'll get into that in a second. But if the show does get a second season, I would love to see more of a focus on Chimera and Osha, but Chimera in particular, because I feel like he's a lot more interesting than Osha. Sorry, girlie, that's just the honest truth. And I would love to understand his backstory more, and like just genuinely what he wants, because he says he wants an acolyte, but like for what? To do what? You know what I mean? Like I just want to know, like, what do you want her for? And his approach is really interesting because he seems to understand that he can manipulate Osha with more sort of like romantic sexual undertones. It's some of it's overt, but other things like him literally getting put naked to take a swim and then get out in front of her naked. And I feel like this would be a very interesting dynamic between like a master and a pupil, where there's these sort of romantic undertones, because like even at the end of the series, you know, where they're staring out at the ocean, he puts his hand over hers, like she's gripping the lightsaber, and then he puts his hand over hers. And I think it's a very interesting direction to go in, because I can't think of any master apprentice dynamic in the Star Wars universe that I'm familiar with that also has like a romantic connotation. So it's an interesting approach on his part, because he's using that as a way to manipulate her. So yeah, Chimera is really hard to read. It makes it very intriguing to me. But all in all, I would say that I find the show to be kind of mid, sort of forgettable, interesting in moments, but like collectively not something that I would, reach for again or watch again. And all the Star Wars shows are different. Some of them are really, really great, like The Mandalorian. I also really love Ahsoka. Others are just not amazing. And I feel like the writing is like the biggest culprit of that, because the cast is doing a good job. They're doing a good job with what they're presented with, and they all seem excited and happy to be there. But I feel like if I had to rank this show in terms of like, is it better than the Book of Boba Fett? I don't think so. Like, I enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett more. I'm not just talking about the episode with the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett story, but no. Like, overall, I enjoy the Book of Boba Fett more than I do this. I enjoy some parts of this. So, like, if I was going to pick up and watch it, it would be just to watch a couple fight scenes. But it wouldn't be to sit down and, like, watch the series again in its entirety. Even though I don't think the show is going to get a second season, I'm not rooting for it not to. I believe that every show deserves 2 seasons, right? So you get your freshman season, you can work out some of the kinks, and then you get a second season. And then if like you don't get an audience, you can't work out the kinks, or it's still not good, you at least had 2 seasons. So I still kind of would want a second season, because I would love to see some of these things get addressed that just didn't. Like, what was the point of the witches? I'm not understanding what the ceremony actually does for the girls, and they all died. I mean, I guess the assumption is that like Indara killed them when they were all controlling Kalnaka, but okay. What happened to Mother Coral? She disappeared into the Force and never to be seen from again. What's a virgins? Like, is it something we can physically see? I mean, I know they've described it, but like, he keeps saying he wants to go back and find the virgins, but I don't I don't know. Like, how did the witches create the girls? Why did they decide to split them into 2 separate bodies, even though they're one consciousness? Or was that something that just they didn't have any control over? I don't know. There's just a lot of things that I would love answered, and most of them don't really get answered outside of Chimera gets his acolyte, which I don't really understand why he wants an acolyte. I'm sure he described it. I think he said, or explained it. He said he wants an acolyte, someone he can pass. I don't know what he said. I'm still not understanding though. Like, to me, having an apprentice, especially on the Sith side of things, doesn't usually work out well for the master, right? Doesn't the apprentice usually overthrow the master and kill them? So if I was a master, I wouldn't be bucking to have an apprentice. You teach them everything and then they gut you in the middle of the night. So just, maybe just being alone is fine, Chimere. Maybe you don't need an apprentice, but nope, he got what he wanted. OSHA's training under him. Okay. And we saw Yoda for a few seconds with the back of his head. So that's the Acolyte. You know what? Even though, like I said, I was not a big fan of the show. I didn't hate the show. I just thought the show was just kind of okay. And I don't really agree with the review bombing that people do. I do think that some Star Wars fans, I would call them fanatics, are incredibly intense. And to them, Star Wars has a very specific X, Y, and Z. Like, if you don't do these things, then it's not Star Wars to them. And I just don't know how anybody watches like 2 episodes of a show and then it's just like the show is trash, right? Because all of the reviews were posted after only the first 2 episodes dropped. And even though maybe some of those critics had seen the whole season, most people probably wouldn't have. And I definitely can't be objective about a show having only seen 2 episodes of an 8-episode season. And I actually liked the first 2 episodes too. So like I wouldn't have said the show is terrible based off of that. But yeah, I don't know. Like, as a fan, as a Star Wars fan, I like to give things a chance. I like variety. I like to have different stories be told. And I like to see different characters, different periods of time, and I like to see Star Wars explain different things. I think witches in the Star Wars universe is cool. I also think that other cultures outside of the Jedi and the Sith having access to the Force makes sense. They're not the only ones who know how to use and access the Force. I think it makes sense that there would be different terminology across the different species that use the Force. So yeah, I like different stories being told. For me, if the show does get a second season, which to me is pretty debatable, we'd have to do a much better job with the script. We're going to have to make it a lot more streamlined and just generally better. And I heard through New Rockstars that the original creator, like the show creator, the showrunner, she pitched an Asajj Ventress story and they said no, so she rolled in some of those elements to this, allegedly. I don't really know. I mean, maybe they said no because they're like, who's checking for an Asajj Ventress story? I don't know if I would be checking for her in live action, but I don't know. I kind of liked Asajj Ventress. I wouldn't mind like an animated story for her. But yeah, I appreciate that the show was original. I appreciate that we focus on a different time, a different period of the Jedi. The Jedi, the High Republic Jedi, it's got some drip to it, the outfits. They're certainly very white, crisp and clean, So yeah, overall, I found the show to be just kind of okay. It's kind of mid for me. I'm not gonna watch it again. But I want to know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to see the varied types of content that I make. So next up, the next video that's going to be on my docket is the Holo Taco Thermal Collection. Sorry, that's not the name of it. It's the Mixed Emotions Collection, but it's a thermal collection. I did get that collection and I am going to be swatching it, reviewing it, maybe even doing some nail art next week. And then of course, Deadpool and Wolverine comes out, which I am fucking stoked for. So I'm going to be doing a review on that. Or if I love it, I may not do a review on it because I don't know. I don't always have a lot to say about movies that I love. So maybe not. I also do want to really finally see A Quiet Place Day One. It sort of came out the weekend that I was going on vacation with my family, so I haven't had a chance to check it out. So I might do that too. Okay, that's my time. I will catch you later. Bye.